Let the big, beautiful Carf Rebel Pro begin. We're starting this assembly now. Let's go over our equipment that's going in this beautiful plane. If you missed the unboxing, there's a link to the playlist down below. Let's get started. So all of our equipment's on the table here. Now, the one thing we're missing for this plane as of right now is the Electron landing gear, but we do have a set coming. Today is Saturday. We should have a set here by maybe Wednesday. This plane is a bit of a time crunch because it's coming down to Tucson Jets with us. And according to my video schedule, the final video of this build will be coming out while we're at Tucson Jets. So anyways, if you're watching the final videos of this build, we're already in Tucson Jets probably. So we do have a time crunch on this guy. That's why we're getting things moving. And when the gear shows up, we'll install the landing gear. So we've got all of our parts laid out here. We'll just cover everything. First thing, because it's right here, we've got a set of Sky Candy landing lights for this aircraft. Now, this is a pretty simple setup. It's nice and basic. So we've got two gear lights. The gear lights are going on the mains, and then we've got a set of wingtip marker lights. Now this is going to be powered from the turbine battery, and we've also got a custom wiring harness. Now this is one of the things I love about the Sky Candy landing lights. Sal, thank you so much for doing up our wiring harnesses. This is great because it incorporates the Castle Creations BEC. The landing lights only need 4.8 volts. So that's what the BEC is there for. And then we've got two SP06 jetty switches, and those SP06 turn the system on and off. So it's super simple. Love it. Awesome. That's going to be wicked for this plane. The other thing we've got here is our control system. So we're using a Central Box 210, Cortex of course, and we've got two Jetty Rec 7s which are going to be providing the system signal, obviously. We do have a R3. I've got one in stock here that we're going to add to this. That's going to be the on-off switch for the central box. And I think we're also going to put a power box GPS unit in here. We're not putting a pitot tube or anything in, but the GPS unit's kind of fun because it shows you like distance traveled during flight and obviously GPS speed, which is kind of fun to see too. Servos, pretty simple setup. 9930s everywhere, a 1220 for the nose steering. Very simple, awesome servo setup for this aircraft. And lastly, our engine power. Our engine power is a Zykoi X95. Now, I tell you, it's pretty crazy to think that little Super Bandit over there, which weighs 23 pounds dry, is absolutely tiny compared to the Rebel Pro. They both have the same engines. Mind-blowing. Power plant's going to be awesome in this plane. I think it's going to be a real winner with this layup. Now, if you watched our Rebel build, the Rebel Classic, the Voodoo scheme, we did a Bluetooth setup. So everything is Bluetooth operated. Not really. Everything's hidden. So everything's underneath the top deck. When you look inside that Rebel Classic Voodoo scheme, it looks empty. The only thing you see is the battery in the front, the UAT, the landing gear. We're doing this one exactly the same. Same setup. It's going to be awesome. So that's all of our parts. First thing to do is set up a new model, get our jetty stuff updated, start burning in our servos, and those are the steps we need to complete first before we move on to anything. All right, so we're going to start with the gluing stuff first because we want to get this done so it's not holding us up later on. So the two big things we have to do first of all is we have to glue our tank fittings on. Now we're going to get our back tank fittings done first. These are pretty straightforward. You've got a big section, small section. Big section goes underneath the wing tube. Small section goes underneath the tank. So those go together fairly simple. These cross braces go in between. So we'll spot glue all that with CA and then we'll high sol it to the tanks. And then the other major thing is going to be our pipe support. Now this pipe support goes on the top of the fuselage. Reason it goes on the top of the fuselage is so if you're deciding to split these fuselages, the pipe stays with the back part of the fuselage. We're not doing that. Our fuselage is getting bolted together and not coming apart, but we're going to high sol this guy together as well too, and pretty straightforward. It only goes together one way. Now the other big thing that we're doing here is we're going to build a shelf across this section right here. That shelf is going to hold all of our equipment and be hidden from the top deck. So everything will be run underneath that shelf, but we want to get our tank completed first before we start focusing on that shelf. Now this part of the fuselage is basically flat, so when we do install that shelf, we're just going to mirror this dimension right here down to the shelf. Okay, so we got everything spot glued together. It's nice and square. And what we did was, number one, I put the fuel fitting on the tank, the vent fitting. Reason for that is so we can tell which way is up and down. And then installed the wood piece there and just put some Sharpie marks on there. So what we're going to do now is sand out this area so our high saw has a good place to stick. If you do sand over the mark, you want to make sure you put high saw on there because that little sanding mark can leak and cause an issue. All right, so for tank fitting, what we did here was pop the tank into place. The back is held underneath the wing tube, centered side to side. And then I got the top piece installed, the screws or bolts that go through the former. There's already holes in there, so we got those lined up like that. Installed the bottom one. Now you can see it kind of sits at an angle here, so it's definitely much easier to get this installed and do it this way, and we've just tacked it in place with some CA. And then what we'll do is we're going to go in now and high saw this all together, and it's going to be just a much simpler way to do all of it, and it fits perfect now. So I'll probably run a bead of CA between the tank and this foam piece, and then we'll put a fillet of high saw all the way around. All right, so we got our tank mounts done there. Our bolts are through the mount, and on the other side we've got our blind nuts installed. So on that side we've got our blind nuts, you can see at the top of the screen there, and put some high saw on the blind nuts so they don't back out. So tank mounting is done. So what we can do now is we can pull that tank out and get our bung and pickup and everything done, so at least that's finished. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to separate the two fuselage sections again. So we're going to separate the back end to get our pipe mounting installed, and then once that's glued, we're going to move on to our vertical and horizontal stab surfaces. All right, so we've got our tank out, and I'm just getting our fittings put together here. So this tank has a center baffle. Now the point of the center baffle is there's a hole through the middle which your fuel pickup system goes through, and then there's a series of holes all the way around the perimeter of the baffle. That's to keep fuel from sloshing around. It can still obviously get past, but it's just it's a better tank design when it's got the center baffle. But you got to make sure you put a rigid piece of tubing through that center piece. So we'll use this piece right here, and what I do is I sand down the ends and just add a glob of solder on each end, and that just helps to keep the tube installed. The tube is still sealing against the actual pipe itself. You're going to wire tie it, safety wire it, but the solder prevents it from pulling off. Okay, so standard procedure here at the shop. We've got a fuel tank. There's a bunch of dust in there, so we put about half of the bottle of alcohol here in the tank, swished it around, dumped it out, put the rest in, swished it around, dumped it out. Now all of the dust and everything is out of our tanks, nice and cleaned out. All right, so we've put some 6mm Festo in the vent fitting, the bung fitting or the fuel fitting, and pressurized the tank. Just using our mouth to blow into this thing, pinched it off with a pair of forceps, and now it is under pressure. So we're going to let it sit for however long we want to, 2 hours, 8 hours, whatever it is, and if it still holds pressure, we're good to go. Okay, so we've got our fuselage separated, flipped upside down. We installed our pipe once already, but first thing I'm doing here is the little cap that goes on the bottom of the vertical stab tube. It's not on there very strong. It actually popped off, so I just re-glued it with some CA. And before we glue our pipe in, we're going to put some high sol on that guy. So that's kind of step number one. And then we're going to install our pipe. Now for that, I've got this guy installed already. We have put the pipe in, checked, marked where we needed to glue. So I just traced those out with Sharpie, and we just sanded all that area out. So that's done. And what we'll do now is we'll glue that back tube cap first, then put our pipe in, then put our holder in, and get this guy glued in place as well. All right, so we've got our pipe mount mounted. We're sticking out 15 millimeters on the pipe as instructed in the manual, and you can see there our pipe mount is all complete. So I just get that in place, spot glued it with some CA, and then went around and got lots of high sol installed. So that'll be just letting that rest till tomorrow. So what we'll do now is we're going to move on to getting our surfaces done for the tail section. I am still putting some thought into our equipment plate that we're going to be using there, but right now we're going to focus on those surfaces. All right, so the manual talks about having to use spacers on some of the servos, like the rudder servo, and I'm out of spacers, so I actually just fired up the laser cutter and we're printing or cutting some spacers, and just using our algo laser and making some various size servo spacers. All right, and while we had the laser out, we made some hush boxes. Those are the covers for the Cortex gyro. I just make them out of the jetty foam, but I've got the file all set up and they work awesome. And they just slip right over top of the Cortex gyro. So I've installed a spacer here. I widened our slot a little bit. We're also gonna have to make the slot longer, but I widened it at just about double the thickness. And this is gonna fit one of the super heavy duty MKS servo arms, no problem, and the position and everything works good. You can see there, you've got great spacing on both sides of those servo arms. So that is perfect, and we'll make that a little bit longer like they suggest in the manual, but that is a shot there of the rudder servo. All right, so we got our hush box assembled here. Use CA, the black CA, to put it together. I take my, my bench grinder and I just do some nice little bevels around the perimeter. Next thing I'm doing is the center hole right there, which shows our color of our Cortex. We're going to fill that in with hot glue, so it actually glows a little bit brighter when the Cortex is operational, so that little button glows red or amber or green. So just waiting to do that, but that is complete. And rudder, we're pretty much good to go here. I'm just going to put the control arm together. I've already got it together and got the center part glued yesterday, but I'm going to take one of the ball joints off now and cover the brass tubing with some shrink tube, and then we can get this guy assembled. Our servo's already screwed in place, and we're going to have to open up our pocket a little bit more, but I wanted to wait until the servo was installed to do that. All right, so rudder linkage is all hooked up here. Looks like the 1.5 inch is definitely the right size. I tried to go on the 1 inch hole on the servo arm. I'm just cleaning up my Loctite there. And that was too short. We weren't getting enough travel. So at the 1.5 inch mark, we're getting, I think, 68 millimeters of travel, and they call for 65 to 70, so we're right in the range. So that's good. So that rudder or vertical stab's all done. We've got our servo lead here. I haven't sorted that out yet, but I'll probably, because this is going to stay on the airplane, probably use the standard connector, and we'll just use a piece of shrink tubing. And of course, I got so much room in this area as well. So set that aside for now. And a couple things here with the other parts that we worked on yesterday. So we had our tank clamped off for 24 hours. I let the pressure out. Still had pressure in it, so tank is good to go. And additionally, I screwed down the pipe now. So what we need to do next is flip this back over, get the back portion attached to the front portion of the fuselage so we can confirm that our pipe is in fact in the right spot. This is the time where we could adjust it. So that piece of wood that's underneath the pipe here, we could build that up a little bit if we need to drop this down. So that's what we want to check and make sure that our turbine sits centered in the pipe. All right, so the Zykoy 195 pretty much fits in there perfectly. Nice little engine. We've got it fairly centered side to side, and we've got it roughly spaced from the tailpipe here. So let's take a look down the back end. Oh yeah, perfect. So absolutely no adjustment needed. That is awesome. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take our back section out one more time, and we are going to put some CA on that screw right there. And what we're going to do is get our wiring run forward. So if we have to take our pipe out to get our wiring kind of fastened, we're going to do that now. And then we can basically, once the wiring's done, we can attach our back end to our front end, and that's a big step accomplished. So we've got our pipe removed and our fuselage just loosely put together here. And we installed some through fittings. These are the 4mm Festo through fittings on our website, and put our wiring together. Now our elevator connectors here both have ashlock connectors, and the Rudder one has a standard servo connector. So those are all just loosely sitting inside the fuselage. I put shrink tubing and a larger piece of shrink tubing on the part that goes into the through fitting. And there's a shot of the loose wires in the fuselage. Nez. Yeah, buddy, I know. Nez is playing with her string. So what we're going to do now is we're going to cover our servo lines in snakeskin, and that coverage is going to come right to this area right here. And then from this area, we're going to have a piece of high temperature fireproof material to come past the turbine area and then back to our standard setup. So that's going to be how we're running things here in this area. All right, so we've got our wires tucked up and run. Right now this is the back of the fuselage. It's sitting sideways, so this is the top. So we've got it nice and snug, run all the way to this front clip right there, zip tied in place, to this one zip tied in place. We're going to put a little bit of shoe goop on our clips as well too, so they don't let go with the adhesive over time. And then we've got this piece of fireproof material. This stuff is insane. You could put a blowtorch on it and nothing happens. So this is going to come down and just protects the hot section of the rear part of this fuselage. So going to put a little bit of shoe goop on those guys, a little bit of CA in our plywood hole, and then we can get our pipe installed on our mount. Okay, so we've got our pipe mounted, we've got our lines run, and we are ready to join our fuselage. Seems like it's very early in the build, assembly, but that's okay. So we've got everything tidied up in the back end. So the next thing to do back there is our elevator servos and surfaces, sorry. So the tail section of this fuselage is like insanely easy. Basically it keyholes together. You've got 4 big bolts that keyhole together, 2 screws that go in the top, 1 that goes in the bottom. We're going to Loctite those in place, and everything in our back end is good to go. All right, so our rudder is installed. Pretty simple installation on the rudder. There's so much room in this front section here that connector is super easy. 1 bolt on the front holds it all together. I did use a longer bolt than the stock one. So the stock one that kind of came in the rudder package is this guy right here. And I changed it out for one of these. So the longer ones, there's actually about that much of the threads poking through the blind nut. So I feel better about that. And the rudder is done. So I've got the plane on the side like that because of the connectors that I put in here. So I used the stick-on connectors with zip ties and put a bit of shoe goop on them. So they are hanging out in there while the shoe goop cures. So we'll leave that like that. Eventually the plane can flip up normal, but now it's time to work on our horizontal stabs. So the first step for me in an assembly like this is figuring out how our servo sits. When you look at the servo pocket, you could go both ways on that servo pocket. The channel here is also centered right in the middle of the servo pocket. So those are some things to consider when you're getting this set up. So what I will do is I'll take the hardware that comes with the kit, which is pretty much already pre-measured and everything, and when we put this together roughly, we can see that the servo arm needs to go towards the surface. So our servo needs to sit in like that. So next thing I will do, I've got this assembled. So these 3 pieces came separately. I put one side on, this will get glued on. We'll put some shrink tubing over top of this, and then our other side is the metal clevis here for the elevator surface. So next thing I'll do is get the servo put in there and see how our spacing is going to work out, just like what we did on the rudder. So we may have to put some spacers behind this guy, figure out what servo arm we're using, how it sits. That's the kind of the biggest challenge with setting these guys up. All right, so it's the next day and we have a plan for our horizontal stabs, but what we want to do is we want to get things moving with our fuselage. So Nez has been helping us out here getting stuff organized. So what we're doing with our Bluetooth connection here, our hidden equipment tray is going to be basically run at the bottom of this section right here. Now, we're going to assume that the top deck here is level, which if you actually get this aircraft sitting properly, the tail kind of sits a little bit higher, but this is level in relation to the wing. So we want to make our tray match up to this right here. So we're not following the angle here, we're following the distance from here down. So we've cut some pieces of ply here. You can see they're at a bit of an angle, and that angle is to compensate for the angle on the side. So we're going to get these guys glued to the sides inside of the aircraft, like that. And that's going to create our shelf. So what we're going to do is get these guys kind of lined up, spot glued in place with some CA, and then we're going to run beads of high sol down the top and bottom. We got to sand the fuselage first because we want to make sure it adheres to the side of the fuselage. So we're going to do some sanding here, and then we'll work on getting this set up. All right, so we got our plane leveled out here. Now I did just install the tank. The tank is still removable with those shelf supports in, or our Bluetooth supports as we call them. And they are C8'd in place right now. So I'm going to mix up some high sol, and we're just going to put some fillets on the top and the bottom of that shelf and leave those things to cure. Okay, so step one on the elevators was to get that servo installed, see how the arm's going to fit and everything. We've got that figured out here. So we've powered up our servo, plugged it into our central box here, into the appropriate channel, and we've got our servo arm installed and used our sub trim to get that centered. So we're ready to, number one, get this guy back in the airplane and just see how the servo arm is going to line up with the slot. I think it's going to be very close. We just have to make the slot a little bit wider for this arm because you can see here, not even close, it's about double the thickness. And then it'll need to be made longer in this direction. So get this servo slipped in place and see how she fits. All right, and just a little change here in what we're doing. Now this is the stock hardware, so you've got these aluminum clevises with the aluminum pin and the little silver C-clip. Now, because we're using the thick heavy-duty arms here, the clevis won't fit over top. So we're going to do the same thing that we did on the rudder, and we're going to use a ball joint. So we've got a nice ball joint on there. The length is actually better or the same on the ball joint. So it actually is a little bit better than the clevis. But anyways, really it's not going to make that much of a difference at all. These clevises are nice. There's nothing wrong with them. That's not the reason we're not using them. Some people have reported that the clips not staying on so well or falling off or whatever, but I think if you put a little bit of CA on those guys, you'll be fine. But we're just switching these out because the other horns that we could use would be the carbon horns. Problem with the carbon horns is they're about half the thickness of the space, so there's actually a huge space in between those two arms. So I think a better solution is just the thick heavy-duty MKS arm with a ball joint and a washer holding everything on. All right, and a little side note here, we are thinking of running a in-person course here at the shop. Maybe we'll call it the Jet Master course or something like that. Basically, it's going to be a day-and-a-half course here in the shop. Obviously, it's a paid thing. I think we're going to max out the participants at 8, maybe 10 initially, and we'll see how it goes. But it's going to be all hands-on. You get to ask me questions. We'll cover a bunch of topics. Anyways, the point of me sharing it in this video is if you're watching this and you are interested, shoot me an email, thelightersideofrc@gmail.com. Put a comment down below that you would be interested in hearing more about this. I'm going to start compiling a list of people that are interested. Not sure entirely of the details yet, but it will be very well organized. Anyways, if you are interested, comment down below, shoot me an email, thelightersideofrc@gmail.com, and I'll add you to the list of people that are interested. Okay, we've got our linkages done on both elevators, very easily done, and we're going to do our servo connections next. So we need to put our ash lock connectors on our servo ends. Now a little while ago I marked these out with a Sharpie marker, so a Sharpie paint marker, so we know which way is signal when we cut that off. And we're going to get some snakeskin over these wires, and then we'll put our connectors on our ends, and we will be good to attach our horizontal steps. Well, I thought this would be a bit of a funny comparison because both of these planes, the Super Bandit, if you're a regular viewer of the channel, we're just wrapping up the Super Bandit. It's got the same engine that the Rebel Pro has. Two very different planes. The Super Bandit right now is lined up to the nose section of the Rebel Pro, and the Rebel Pro's front part of the fuselage is actually basically longer than the Super Bandit is. So it's pretty nuts. Kind of cool, pretty nuts, but it's pretty neat to see these two comparisons side by side. I'm just going to put a shout out here for channel membership. If you guys are interested in channel membership, it's kind of a unique thing. Basically, channel membership, it's a paid service. What it gives you is early access to our videos. There's some links down below. Check it out if you're interested. It's kind of a cool perk and something unique. Also, Lighter Side of RC After Dark. Basically, the Lighter Side of RC After Dark is a separate channel. We do live streams here from the shop, usually every 2 weeks for about 2 hours. It's cool because you get to interact with us and ask us questions on the live stream, and it's very, very neat experience for me and also for all the viewers as well too. So definitely encourage you to check that stuff out. All right, and that wraps up video number 1 in the build series of the Rebel Pro from Carf. Very, very quick build so far. We got a lot accomplished. Obviously, our fuselage is assembled. The back end is done, pipes done. What we're gonna start the next video with is installing the engines, and then we're gonna get into the wings. Our landing gear should be here tomorrow, and it's going to be wrapped up here pretty quick. Probably 2 more videos to get it completely wrapped up. We do have a few details and stuff that we'll go into with programming and so on. So thanks guys for watching. If you have any questions or comments, list them down below in the comments section. You can also reach out to me at thelightersideofrc@gmail.com. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next video.